أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين صلوات الله. I began this khutbah, as we begin all of our khutbah, with a reminder for taqwa, that we try to cultivate this constant sense that we are under the gaze of God, and He knows not only what we do and say, but what we think and what our intentions are. And we should always be conscious of His presence in our life as one watching over us and one who will also judge us. In today's khutbah, I'd like to focus a little bit on this one phrase from Ziyarat Ashura, where we acknowledge that the day of Ashura was a day of celebration for the Banu Umayyah and for the Banu Marwan. So towards the end of Ziyarat Ashura, we have this phrase, Allahumma inna hadha yawmun farihat bihi Banu Umayyah. Allahumma, what is it? وابن آكلة الأكباد اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. So we're pointing to the day of Ashura. We're saying this is a day in which the Banu Umayyah, who were the liver-eating sons of liver-eating fathers, used to celebrate and seek barakah, tabarrakat bihi. They would seek barakah and blessing on this day. A little bit further down in the ziyarah we say, وَهَذَا يَوْمٌ فَرِحَتْ بِهِ Banu Alu Ziyad wa Alu Marwan biqatlihim al-Husayn. It is the day when the family of Umayyah and the family of Marwan, the family of Ziyad and the family of Marwan would rejoice. Farah, they would feel joy on this day of Ashura. So this sentence, these two sentiments that are there, we're acknowledging a reality of this kind of propaganda machine that the Banu Umayyah, both branches of the Banu Umayyah, employed to shift people's understanding, shift people's sentiment away from Ahlul Bayt, and specifically away from any consciousness of what occurred at Karbala, so that they would be so lost in joy and Eid and celebration and these kinds of things that they would have no space, no place in their even Islamic sensibility to consider the events of Karbala. We have some commentary on this. I'll just share it with you in Mafatih al-Jinan, if you are conscientious about looking up and following along with the calendar year. So in the section that goes month by month, then we have Abbas Qummi has included on the day of Ashura a few pages of commentary on this propaganda trend. And so he mentions the following. He quotes from one of our commentaries on Ziyarat Ashura, known as Shifa al-Sudur. He says the author of Shifa al-Sudur makes elaborate comments in his commentary on Ziyarat Ashura, and then he quotes the lines that I just quoted. He says several aspects were involved, this is now quoting from Shifa al-Sudur, several aspects were involved in Banu Umayyah's practice of celebrating Ashura as a day of blessing. One of them was that it was a custom with them to replenish on this day one's supply of food provisions, a practice seen as a source of plenty, prosperity, and felicity until the next year. So if you see that in our Sharia, it's makruh to work on Ashura and earn a living and go shopping and go buy your groceries and buy clothing for the next year. Those kinds of things that you would expect that we would do on Eid. that we would do, on a joyous time of the year, it's makruh to do those things on the day of Ashura. It says, in response to pushing back against this propaganda that this is a day of tabarruk, that you should go and, today's the day to go and work and earn and buy your stores and this kind of thing, because that'll add blessing to your financial situation. So he says, hence in the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, one finds recurring instructions forbidding this practice. Another was holding of festive rituals extending from shortening of the nails and mustaches and wearing new clothes to feasting, shaking hands, and merrymaking. So these are all practices that were being encouraged as part of this propaganda machine. All of which became an Umayyad tradition and is still prevalent among their followers. A third practice was observance of fasting on this day. Many traditions were forged describing its alleged merits, and that day's fast became a prescribed sunnah with them. Right? So this is something we still see. And one of my points is that this propaganda that was begun by Banu Umayyah has such long-lasting effects that we see many people amongst our Sunni brothers and sisters, they have bought this completely, and they have adopted these practices from Banu Umayyah, presumably not realizing this is from Banu Umayyah, right? Thinking that those forgeries, those innovations that they introduced were actually part of Islam, and now they practice these things. One thing you see is that, of course, there are people on the Salafi and Wahhabi side of the spectrum who are completely in line with this Umayyad propaganda, and they will make it a very strong point to declare that Ashura is a day of celebration and there's a tie to Musa's delivery and this and that, and so therefore we fast and all of this. Recently I've received some emails from organizations, more kind of woke Muslim organizations, which will pay respect to both sides and say, it's a special day for all Muslims. Some celebrate because of this connection to Musa, some mourn because of this connection to Imam Hussein. But they acknowledge both, that it's special for all Muslims, therefore you should donate to us, whatever the organization is, on this special day. Right? So that's maybe the liberal and progressive form of this propaganda machine, but it's still accepting it as legitimate, that whatever propaganda was fed to the people, it's still legitimate, and it is a day of blessing, even if it might also be a day of mourning. Another aspect of their celebrating, this is Shifa al-Suduk continuing, celebrating Ashura as an auspicious day, was that supplication and petitionary prayers were regarded as mustahab observances of this day. To this end, they concocted merits for this day and composed several supplications which were taught to the impious with the purpose of confounding the truth. Accordingly, in the sermons that were delivered in their towns, they attributed an excellence to this day and a happy outcome for every prophet, such as the cooling of Nimrod's fire, the landing of Noah's ark, the drowning of Pharaoh's army, and the deliverance of Jesus from the hands of the Jews, saying that all these things happened on the day of Ashura. That's why it's a day of celebration. Then he quotes a tradition that Sheikh Saduq narrates from a person who narrates from Mitham at-Tammar. So Mitham, the great companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, is saying, by God, these people will kill their prophet. So Mitham actually died before Karbala, probably like within a few days before Muslim ibn Aqil's uprising. So between the, actually not before, before the uprising. So between the time that Ibn Ziyad came into Kufa and Muslim ibn Aqil was finally killed, there was a campaign to purge Kufa of these well-known Shia of Ali. So Mitham was one of those. He's the 10th, according to the prophecy that Amir al-Mu'min had given to him. He would be the 10th of 10 people to be crucified, and that for 3 days you'll be hung by this one tree. And he even pointed it to the tree and said, this is a tree, it's the one growing in the household of Amr ibn Hurayth in his yard. So Mitham from that point on would go to that tree every day, do ziyarah of the tree and talk to it and say, you've been created for me and I've been created for you. Our fate is intertwined and this and that. So even before, he's not a witness to Karbala, because sadly for him he died before, but he had received prophecies not only of his own death at the hand of Ibn Ziyad, but even what would happen in terms of the propaganda machine after Karbala. So Mitham quotes this, narrates this, "By God, these people will kill their prophet's son on the 10th day of Muharram, and these enemies of God Almighty will regard that day as an auspicious occasion. That is bound to happen as it is in God's foreknowledge. I know it from an epistle that reached me from my master, the commander of the faithful." Then the person who's talking to Mitham and receiving this from him, he says that how could they regard the day of Hussein's martyrdom as a day of good fortune? So when I asked this question, Mitham said, "They will forge a tradition alleging that it was a day on which God accepted Adam's repentance, though in fact God accepted Adam's repentance in the month of Dhul-Hijjah," Mitham is saying. "They will claim that it was on this day that Jonah, Yunus, was rescued from the fish's belly, though God had brought Jonah out of the fish's belly in the month of Dhul-Qa'dah. They will claim that it was on this day that Noah's ark settled on the Mount Judi, though that happened on the 18th of Dhul-Hijjah. They will claim that it was on this day that God parted the sea from Moses, though that happened in the month of Rabiul al-Awwal." So in this hadith, Mitham he's received this information from Amir al-Mu'mineen to prepare him, and then hopefully through him to prepare people for the propaganda and immunize them against the effects of that propaganda by letting them know that eventually people will not only kill Hussein, but then even adulterate the whole event as a day of celebration and connect it to all these prophetic events and manipulate history of the world and say all those events took place on the day of Ashura, so we should celebrate. Then he continues, this is Shifa al-Sudur again, "Despite the explicit emphasis in this tradition of Mitham, which is on the miracles of prophethood and imamat, and an evidence of the veracity of the Shia creed," anyway, so he continues like that. But that gives us a sense of the historical effort to make this a day of tabarruk and a day of farah, blessing and rejoicing by the Banu Umayyah, and then both branches, the Banu Sufyan and the Banu Marwan. So both of these branches of the Banu Umayyah, they had this concerted effort to try to whitewash the event of Karbala by manufacturing all of these things. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One lesson that we can draw directly related to Karbala is the obvious one, that this was a terrible practice by a tyrannical regime to cover up their own iniquities, their own injustices, their own perpetration of dhulm. The broader lesson that I think we should derive from this is that we also, as followers of Ahlul Bayt, followers of this correct tradition from Imam Hussein, should be perpetually aware that the sunnah of Banu Umayyah and Banu Marwan is not limited to them. And just like we always saying kullu yawmin ashura wa kullu ardin Karbala, and we want to recognize how this is a perpetual engagement between the forces of justice and the forces of injustice. Those forces of injustice also continue to do the same kinds of things. These are parts of the playbook. So propaganda, brainwashing, influencing society is a very useful technique that's used by anyone who wants to manipulate people. And this is not something that only happened in the past, it happens very much right now as well. And we are constantly bombarded with that. We are the objects of that propaganda on a daily basis. So the more we can connect with the ziyarah and that historical dynamic, the more we should also be attuned, aware, on guard for what are the kinds of propaganda that we are now subjected to, and are we sufficiently alert so that we don't give in, that we don't swallow it and consume it, and then even start to embody it in our ways of thinking, our framework for how we consider things. So this is a very challenging thing, and it's not something that's so easy. Just because you're aware doesn't mean you're immune. Right? You can be aware, and it's still very tough, and it's a constant challenge to not only recognize, but then also to avoid, and if not avoid, then at least be aware that you're not changing yourself and changing your way of thinking. So a few examples that I think are very obvious and very prominent in what we consume, the media and all the other things that we consume now. One has to do with the LGBT rhetoric and that agenda. It's so pervasive, obviously, and I don't have to tell you how pervasive the agenda is and how much it has permeated into our society. One very small aspect of it, so one of the parts of this agenda is to normalize this kind of choice that people make to engage in certain kinds of haram activity, and normalize it as this is the way I'm made. If you're religious, this is the way I've been created by God, and if you're not religious, the way that evolution has led to my existence, and this is who I am, this is what I am, this is my identity, this is it's essentially who I am as a person. And it's not a choice. As much as you don't have a choice to be a human or dog, you can't choose to you didn't choose to be human, you are, just as much as you don't choose to be the color skin you have or have the genetics that you have or this or that. So they want us to understand that their the sexual orientation or whatever these things that they identify themselves are not choices that they've made, but rather they are parts of their being as much as their skin color or their genes or any other part of their being. So that is a huge part of the agenda, because once it's normalized, then how can you say it's wrong? Any person, any religion, any creed that says that engaging in these activities is wrong, it's as strange and as wrong as it is to say it's wrong to be black, or it's wrong to be brown, or it's wrong to be white, or that being one color or another color is better and another color is worse. As absurd as that proposition is, then it should also be just as absurd for people to say that it's wrong to be, gay or this or that. So that's the agenda, and one of the very, I think, nefarious and very subtle ways that is fed to us, that even we often buy into, not realizing, is just the vocabulary that's used. So even acknowledging, simply saying that, here's my coworker, he is gay. This is my classmate, she is, lesbian. As benign as that seems, because that's how they would introduce themselves, as benign as that seems, simply me saying that is implicitly acknowledging that that's a valid category. That there is such a thing as a gay person or a lesbian person. Right? So implicitly then, without even realizing, I've already helped that cause. I've already supported that whole agenda, because I have acknowledged that this is a reality. When Islam doesn't allow for this. This is a personal choice that a person makes. I can choose to commit all sorts of sins. Those are choices I make. Yes, I might have, it's perfectly within our understanding of how Allah creates that we have different challenges, different tendencies. I might be more prone to a particular kind of sin. So I might be more prone to being angry, or be more prone to being, very ravenous with I eat too much and I love to eat. Like that could be a vice that I have. I'm more prone. Another person never feels hungry, never desires food, so it's not difficult for them to refrain from haram food or haram drink because they never have a temptation. Another person might be very tempted to haram drink and haram food. So yes, that's perfectly acceptable that people have different challenges and some people have different tendencies. And whether it's nature or nurture, it doesn't matter. It's still part of who you are, that you've been created and you've been raised. Now you are, in reality, you and your soul have a certain tendency towards a vice or a virtue. That's perfectly acceptable. And that is part of the challenge. So each of us has tendencies to different kinds of vices, and those are our particular tests that Allah is offering us, that here's your opportunity. And the law is the same. All of you are expected to strive for being patient, to strive for being forbearing, to strive to make sure that you abstain from haram activities, haram consuming of food and all these different things. So the standard is unified for all people. The challenge is different for each of us. Following some laws is very easy for me and it's very difficult for you, and then vice versa. A different law, it's very easy for you and very difficult for me. But all of us have to strive to abide by that law that Allah has given. He's given us a law that is what He wants all human beings to strive for and what all human beings are capable of striving for. He hasn't given us any duty, any wajib duty that is more difficult than what a person can bear. Nor has He made us abstain from a haram that we are inevitably going to fall into. The wajib and the haram are all at the kind of common denominator, what all human beings are capable of accomplishing. Yes, mustahabbat, those virtues, the makarim al-akhlaq, those highest standards, those are never-ending spectrums of virtue. And no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I strive in that path of attaining a virtue, there are always going to be more levels that I could attain. So yes, no human being is going to get to the end of it. And it's a constant struggle. But with the wajib and the haram, these are things that we can attain, we can accomplish, we can do. So it's not the case that Allah has created people. Some people are quote-unquote heterosexual and some people are quote-unquote homosexual. They're not two different kinds of people. But by using the vocabulary, that's my point, that the propaganda is there and we're constantly bombarded with it in every kind of media at every turn, and it's very tempting and it's very easy to slip into just using the vocabulary. It's the very least kind of a thing, simply saying this person is gay. Even if I say this person is gay and I don't approve, or it's wrong. Even the wrong and don't approve that's fine, that's a good thing to say, but the problem is I acknowledge that the person is gay. I use that category as a reality. This is an actual category of people, an actual species of people, is that there's some people who are like this and some people who are like that. So already very passively, without even realizing it, I've already bought the propaganda. So that's something to just food for thought. So again, I'm connecting it, for those who came in late, to the propaganda machine of Banu Umayyah and Banu Marwan against Imam Hussein. That's a propaganda machine that can be utilized for so many different things. And in our current world, it's used for different kinds of immoral and wrong ideas, wrong activities, wrong creeds. And it's very challenging to be aware of it, and even more challenging to keep yourself on the right path in the face of that propaganda. But it is a struggle that we have to engage in. Another example that I'll close with is with regard to the state of Israel. And for instance, some of these terms that are co-opted, anti-Semitism, for instance, is a phrase that's been co-opted, which now is equated in our cultural lexicon. It means anti-Jew and anti-Israel. But it's been co-opted, it's been limited to only refer to one particular thing. Etymologically, anti-Semitism, Semites are Arabs and Jews together. Jews don't have a monopoly on being Semitic. Arabs are also Semitic. They're all children of Shem, of Sam, Ibn Nuh, alayhi salam. But by using that vocabulary and equating anything and any hatred of Jews or Judaism, if we also use the term anti-Semitic to refer to that specific thing, then we're also feeding into the whole propaganda machine. We've bought it, now we're using it, and we're supporting it implicitly simply by using that term to refer to that specific thing. If we're fair, we should, even an act against Arabs, we should say that's anti-Semitic. If it's against the race of Arabs, against Arab culture, those kinds of things, that's also anti-Semitic. It's against a Semitic group. But think how strange that is. If Israel wished to do something against the Palestinians because they're Palestinians, you say this is an anti-Semitic attack on the Palestinians. It's like there's so much dissonance in our mind. The sentence doesn't even make sense to us anymore because we've absorbed the rhetoric so much. Or the term Holocaust, for instance, which refers generally to any sort of conflagration, any sort of fire and burning of masses and killing of people. Even the specific activities of the Third Reich against people in Europe was not limited to the Jews. They weren't the only victims of the Third Reich. But they're the only ones who have been able to co-opt this term to refer only to themselves. It's very, again, challenging, even if you use the word Holocaust to refer to the killing of Catholics by the Nazis, or the Gypsies by the Nazis. That seems like a wrong usage because we're so used to thinking of Holocaust means the killing of Jews by the Nazis. All right, so this is I think now if you were to call what Israel is doing to our Palestinian brothers and sisters a Holocaust, which it is, it would be so inflammatory. People would say, how dare you use the term? The term only belongs to the Jews and only they can use it for their thing. How dare you use it for what the Jews do to somebody else? But it's a perfectly accurate analogy to say that that was the German Holocaust of the Jews, this is a Jewish or Israeli Holocaust of the Palestinians. The term genocide, Holocaust, these kinds of things, very clearly they apply to what the Israelis are doing. But we're so steeped in the propaganda, and it's so difficult for us to get out of it, that even for us, I think it's difficult to use these terms in the way that we might know that we should, or at least we should avoid using them in the ways that are beneficial to those who espouse wrong ideas and are against truth, against Islam, against God. But it's very difficult for us to get out of it. So some food for thought, some connection with Ziyarat Ashura. One of the lessons of Ziyarat Ashura, as we do Tabarri and Tawalli, one part of Tabarri, cutting off from evil and godlessness and things that are against God, is also being very aware of the propaganda of the godless and trying to immunize yourself against it, be aware of it, resist buying into it, using it. But it's an incredible struggle that we're all engaged in on a daily basis, and we should realize that we're continuing the struggle that Imam Hussein has paved the way to, and inshallah if we can stay with him, stay with Ahlul Bayt, stay with Islamic teachings, then that's our only way to at least give ourselves a chance to avoid these nefarious things that are in society. Allah, we ask you to shower mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and protect us from the propaganda of those who would have us believe and do evil. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu as-samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد ابن عبد الله وصل على علي بن أبي طالب وصل على فاطمة الزهراء وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. Once again, I encourage all of us to foster taqwa within ourselves and within our families and all those that we have influence over. Very briefly, I want to just mention one fiqhi lesson that was inspired in my mind from an announcement that was made last night. So there was an announcement that was made that there's a raffle going on to raise money for the Wali al-Asr Masjid that Sayyid Sulaiman and his team are working towards building in the DC area. And so the raffle structure is a problematic structure. We have to make sure that we're doing it correctly. And the way it was announced kind of without any guidance, so that could cause problems. So raffle and lottery are the same thing. Islamically, these are under the same category. It's called Ya Nasib in Arabic. And so there's a whole discussion in our fiqh about whether or not it's permissible to participate in bitaqa ya nasib, these lottery tickets or raffle tickets that a person purchases. So the guideline is basically there are two ways that you might think of it. If you buy a ticket for the lottery or for the raffle, and your intention in buying that ticket is to give a donation or to participate in some good act. Mashru' khayri is the term that's used by our fuqaha, some sort of good deed, good act. So in this case, building the masjid. Right? So if that's the purpose, I'm donating this $100 toward the masjid. Right? And in exchange, they're also giving me this ticket. And yes, then they'll have a drawing and there's a prize. And if my thing is, my ticket is drawn, then I get the prize. That's by the side, but my intention is to give it as, for the good deed, then that's permissible. It's permissible to buy the ticket. Right? If, however, your intention is to you're basically buying the tickets to get the prize. Your intention is, I really like that gold bracelet they're offering, and I'm paying for the ticket for the possibility that I might get the bracelet. Now this is called qimar. This is under the same category as gambling. Right? That is haram. So now buying the ticket becomes haram. Right, so that's the main thing you have to consider when you're doing this. It's not just when you flash the bracelet and your young girls, they see it now. I want the bracelet, and they say, "Can I go buy a ticket because I want that bracelet?" Right? It's a very innocent thing that it's very reasonable to think they would want to do that, but that would make the buying of the ticket haram because their intention is that I really want the bracelet and I have a chance of getting it, and so I'm going to buy it to get the bracelet. So you want to make sure that your intention, your children's intention, whoever's buying the ticket, your intention is clear that I'm participating in this because it's going towards the masjid, because it's going towards some good deed, and I want to participate in that and support that activity, and this is a very creative way to try to raise money besides just asking for donations. Fine, that's great. You can buy the ticket, it's halal, and if you get the prize also, it's halal. Yeah, that's tricky. No, you can't change the intention after the fact. Yeah, so you can return the ticket and then buy it again, maybe something like that. But yeah, you have to think of some other workarounds, but you can't fix your intention after the fact. So that's one thing. And then in terms of maybe this is a less helpful thing to say, but even if you participated in the haram way and did haram by buying the ticket for the purpose of getting the bracelet, so your purchase was haram. The money you gave was not, you had no right to do it. You've earned a sin for having bought it for the wrong reason. However, the prize that you get from that is still halal for you. Yes, that goes for lottery as well. Now, besides the fact that it's a waste of money, it's a terrible, it's a trap, it's an addiction, it's those kinds of things. All those things are separate that become haram for those things. But just as a transaction, can I buy a lottery ticket? Right? Now we're talking state lottery, these lotteries that are for schools and making up for all the failures of government because they can't raise the tax money. In legitimate ways, they sell lottery tickets to pay for education. So it's not permissible to buy the ticket because there the intention is I want a chance at that jackpot of this many $1 billion or whatever it is. Right? So buying it is haram, but if you were to get it, if you were to win it, then it's halal. What you get is halal. So you've done a haram, and you also have a lot of money if you end up winning it, and you probably lost your soul in the process. Yeah. That's fine. So now it's a different transaction. This time you did it right. Yeah. All right. So that's just something to be aware of, and maybe the announcers who are promoting this also can give a little bit of nuance to the announcement so that people have the right intention when they buy their tickets. And they're not, we're not doing a good deed in a bad way. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma aghfir lil-mu'minina wal-mu'minat wal-muslimina wal-muslimat al-ahya'i minhum wal-amwat. Allah, we ask you to shower your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Help us, Allah, to learn all of the lessons of Karbala and implement them in our life in the best way. In this season of Karbala and commemorations of Ashura, help us to commemorate Imam Hussein in a way that does makes him proud of us, makes him happy with our activities. Help us to reflect and to learn, and inshallah to change in a way that is closer to him and closer to his values and his principles. And help us inshallah to learn our fiqh, learn the laws of Ahlul Bayt, and live our lives according to those laws, and to avoid sin at all cost. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar.